Hi, and welcome to Trekkie and Beyond, a Star Trek podcast. I'm Moneca.
And I'm Andrea, and welcome to episode 8 of season 2 of Strange New Worlds, Under the Cloak of War, or as it should be called, PTSD and how not to handle it. Captain Pike and the crew of the Enterprise are welcoming a Klingon defector from the war, and it's their job to shuttle him to a starbase. But his presence is very triggering for a lot of the crew members who were present during the Klingon War. This episode is a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and just some misunderstanding of how Starfleet should act, or how they're expected to act. I should say that. So, Moneca, initial reactions. What did you think?
I really like this episode because sometimes it's just the quiet ones that you should be most afraid of. And in this case, the first season, I thought M'Benga was a quiet father, doctor. Little did I know, he's a combat war veteran. All this other stuff is unveiled in this episode that I felt like I should have known before. and and I will want him in my corner for sure because he can keep a secret, unlike some other people. And he is tactful and resourceful. And I learned a lot of backstory between him and Chapel that was in the back of my mind that I wanted to know. And finally, it was revealed how they met, how they have bonded across the years, and what they have gone through. And we learn not to judge a book by its cover. We learn that repeatedly, time and time again. But people tell fibs, and sometimes it catches up to them. In this case, it didn't end well for the guy who's lying the whole time. What did you think?
So this was one of the few episodes where I did not like Captain Pike. I understand people have to work through their trauma, but you cannot just expect someone to swallow it for you. Yeah. And I feel like Captain Pike had this mentality that they're Starfleet and they're going to rise above. And that was not fair to M'Benga and everyone else, especially M'Benga and Chapel. And that's the reason why I did not like this episode, because Captain Pike has always been that captain who, yes, he always rose above, but he never really truly asked too much of his team than what they were capable of. And in this one, it just seemed like he had this unrealistic reality. Just because you needed this man to feel accepted, don't put the people who he directly affected in his path and tell them we're Starfleet, deal with it. This entire episode could have been avoided if they had just confined that man to quarters. If they had just confined the ambassador to quarters. And we'll get into it as we go into a deeper dive of this episode, and even explaining why we would need you to stay in quarters, or pick and choose exactly who he's going to interact with. Because there were other people on the ship he could have dealt with. And then Captain Pike is almost like a test of putting the people who were directly affected by this man's actions in his line of fire. And I just, what did you think was going to happen, Captain Pike? What did you think was going to happen?
I just need to ride your wave for a little bit, because I agree. I did not like Pike as well in this episode. I like the overall storyline, but I didn't like Pike. And I felt like he was following the orders of Starfleet, and they could have just used a shuttle. There's lots of times in which Amanda and Sarek are just transported around in a shuttle. They could have just used a shuttle. You didn't need the whole crew to escort this ambassador.
On the other end of my initial reaction, I loved what I learned about Nurse Chapel. I loved what I've learned about M'Benga. But overall, just the position that they were put in, I did not like it. I couldn't enjoy this episode. And I think the point of this episode was maybe not to be enjoyed, was to be more informational, because I did not enjoy a single minute of this episode. I liked what I saw when I learned about their history, but this was not This was not a fun episode. I'm not quite sure I'll ever watch this one again. So, going into our deeper dive to talk about the things that we liked and disliked about this episode. We have met, and the guy that we were talking about, the ambassador, is the Klingon General Ra. And he is a Klingon war veteran. And during the war, he turned against the Klingons and defected to Starfleet and was like helping them defeat the war. Now he is now he tries to be a member of peace, a focus of peace, to stop the senseless killing and to help bridge the gap between the Klingons and everyone else they were killing, because that's just the humans. And we meet this man as he comes onto the pattern buffer, and first reaction about him is he seems like he's a chill dude. He does come across like he is this relaxed man who is a philosopher, who is trying to be about peace, who is trying to be about the betterment of society. And then you have the next quick scene is Ortegas putting her foot in her mouth, but at the same time speaking her truth. Because, and the only reason I'm saying she's putting her foot in the mouth is because of the timing, not because of what she said, because she had every right to believe, because she was directly affected by this gentleman, by the ambassador. It's just the timing was wrong, not that what she said was wrong. But she put her foot in the mouth at the timing of what she said. And I will say the general just had to eat it. Not the general, the ambassador just had to eat it because she was right. He was a butcher. He was the general. He did create orders for people to be killed. So that's what I mean by butcher. We'll get into the other part later. What did you think of the opening scene of meeting the ambassador and then like Starfleet's first reaction, Enterprise's first reaction?
Okay, so the moment he beamed on board, I said, "Oh my goodness, I recognize that chin."
Yes.
And it's the captain from The Wire, and I was like, "Oh, I know him." I don't remember his name exactly, but I looked it up. Robert Wisdom. But it was nice to see him in this starring role, as well as there's another person that plays another guest that plays a doctor on the battlefield. So I know that the actor is very distinguished, so I kind of perked up because I knew it was going to be good acting come on board, and it was definitely believable for me. As a mature Klingon, I like the hair, the locks, his mannerism, his walk with the cane, the little limp. So I was intrigued. I agree with you. Erica had the right to say what she did. I feel like Uhura should have given her some sort of clue.
Communicate.
Like,
Communications.
Communicate.
Communications. Communicate.
So certain.
That is literally your job. Hey, Ortega, stop talking. Or hey, Captain on Bridge. Or hey,
right.
Communication is key. A healthy level of communication is what every relationship needs, both friendship and romantic. And Uhura, you let her down.
Yes, and I felt that a few times, including during the dinner later, and a few other times. I was like, Uhura, just be quiet. Let these other people share their feelings. And so it was a little weird. I didn't the way her character was written, but that was minor compared to some of the other parts of this episode.
So jumping off of that, I was going to say it for the second half, but let's just go ahead and talk about it now. So that was a theme in this episode of people who were a part of the war and people who weren't a part of the war having very different reactions. And as we know, a lot of the Enterprise crew, they weren't a part of the war. They were too far away to be of any value during the fight. But not everyone on the ship was. So now we know that Ortegas was a part of it. One of the people, I don't think they gave her a name, but one of the transport people who were in the room, she was a part of it. We know the Nurse Chapel. We know that Dr. Mbanga were a part of it. And they were stationed on the same planet that the general was, and that was the general they were fighting against. And I'm going to be super honest. I have been guilty of this, of talking about things I don't understand. And thinking because I have a outside view of everything, I can explain it. But Nurse Chapel explained it to Spock perfectly.
Yes.
You don't know, like you can't understand unless you were there. It's something everyone can have an opinion about something, but opinion is not fact. And your opinion, regardless of the fact that everyone is allowed their own opinion, does not mean you are correct. And in this case, she's like, I can't explain to you what it feels like because you weren't there. And like I understand, like, it's the truth. And I feel like a lot of people on the Enterprise were acting as Starfleet, which is not necessarily the problem, but they weren't respecting the fact that their fellow ensigns and commanders and other members of their crew were actually going through PTSD having this man on their ship. A man who may not have been the person who physically killed their friends, but had a hand in it. And they were acting like they could not get over it. It was a part of Starfleet that I didn't like to see. I was like, you're not understanding what they're going through because you're expecting them to be better people, but without understanding what they fully went through.
And that reminds me that Uhura was in the academy at this time, right? So she just left a few years ago. So she's young, naive at this point in the timeline, and doesn't know that she should lay low in these types of conversations. Pike did. He was quiet and too reserved for me, Una. But I also like this connection to Discovery and the Battle of the Binary Stars. It does show this whole ripple effect of the battle with the Klingons. It just doesn't occur in one show. If you're going to showcase a connected timeline with multiple shows in that series, you do need to have the consequences for these types of things, and they're going to live for centuries within this. So, yeah, and this is before Worf, right? Joining the Federation.
It was just another theme throughout the episode of like the blatant blindness to what people are going through, and I was just like, it almost felt forced that they were forced to be so ignorant. Because like Pike, you have way more understanding than this. Like Pike from a couple episodes would have told Mbenga, "Don't worry about coming to dinner. I'm sorry he's on the ship. Don't worry about coming." Nurse Chapel, you ain't gotta come. Ortegas, you ain't gotta come. Because while we need to show him the best of Starfleet, I'm not going to put my people at risk for this. That's like the Pike we would have seen a couple episodes ago. Where was that Pike at this one?
Spock stepped up for me by changing the subject, so slightly deflecting. He was trying to be hospitable in as much as you can be by making like a tea with a hot kettle. And it's interesting that the Klingon ambassador couldn't stand the heat from the hot kettle, but just last episode, Spock had to hold that hot kettle. So, but Spock tried his best, but I could see that he has an ambassador kind of skill set in him in several of those scenes.
Which honestly is a lot to discuss, and there's a lot to get into about Dr. Mbenga and how it's always, as Moneca said in the first half, it's always the quiet ones. This is why you don't piss off your quiet friend. You keep your quiet friend in your pocket. Because when your quiet friend says no, listen. When your quiet friend speaks, listen. When your quiet friend says, please leave, you leave. Yeah. You don't try and reason with them. You don't try to talk to them. You listen to them. Because if the quiet friend decides to actually speak up, that means they have something to say, and you need to pay attention. Dr. Mbenga has been a man who, at first, I thought he was an overprotective father who just could not understand. I gave him so much crap in the first season of Strange New Worlds. I was like, dude, you cannot keep your daughter in a pattern buffer. You can't do it. You just can't. That is not a life. You are keeping her for you. You're bringing her out when you want to see her and then putting her back in before she can experience any type of life. That's not fair. That is not fair. I hated him. I hated this man. I thought he was a weak man. Season 1, Andrea, you were wrong. He was wrong for doing that, but he is not a weak man. He is a man who has saw so much death that he could not bear to see another person die. Because as we see in this episode, he does the pattern buffer trick again. He teaches Nurse Chapel about the pattern buffer trick to try and save someone who they did not have they didn't have the access in their camp to save him, because they didn't have the supplies they needed. They didn't have anything that they needed to save him. So they transported him to keep his code in the computer so that way they can bring him back when they could save him. We saw he is well versed in ancient or modern, but like ancient medical techniques of how to save people. We also see that even while he's on that planet, he still has a past where he had the most hand-to-hand combat kills. That this man had a secret. He is like Taken. He has a special set of skills that if he brings them out, there's a problem. And we also learned that after he saw the death of so many of his friends, he decided to finish the mission that they were trying to undertake. And in that mission, he is actually called the Butcher of Guile. It's very interesting because that is the name of the ambassador. That is the name that the Klingons call him, because he has the title of killing his own members to escape, to get to the Starfleet, to defect. And Dr. Mbenga even asks him, which one fought the hardest? Which one fought the hardest against you? And the ambassador just throws out a name. And Dr. Mbenga ends up telling him, it was your captain who fought the hardest, who held me back so you could escape. That was the only thing that did not make me regret watching this episode. I still won't watch it again. But that line itself was the whole, I was like, okay, that made this entire episode worth it.
Oh, yes. And the opening scene included a panic attack by Mbenga. And you could see during the dinner, Nurse Chapel was gripped her glass of liquor really hard. Like both of them had a really hard time. Erica had a hard time. So you could see this built up stress. It wasn't that they just waited until the last 10 minutes to drop this out on us. We had seen it build up. And I really appreciate the flashbacks, because every time I heard incoming transport, I started feeling like, oh my goodness, there's more danger. There's more people that's injured, that's being in, that they have to treat. And they had a hard time turning that over again and again and again. There's just people with organs. Nurse Chapel had to help pump a
heart with her hands.
Yes. So they didn't have the equipment, as you mentioned. So they were definitely under-resourced. They were in a war zone, and you could see explosions around them. So seeing that trauma, having to deal with it, death, seems like every few seconds, I think was traumatic. And as you stated, you never really know that until you're in it. It's hard to explain, and it just doesn't walk away no matter how much treatment you have. I'm glad that even though this is episodic, that they showed us gradually. They dropped this information to us, so I wasn't completely shocked about this. Yeah, like you, I'm really impressed by his skill set. And he even created that Protocol 12, him being Mbenga, created that adrenaline pain inhibitor that we saw a few episodes ago.
That green stuff.
Yeah, and so he gave Nurse Chapel one, and I think he took one before he became the Butcher and took out the Klingons in that Black Ops mission. That's a whole other level.
There's so much. It's hard to explain in words the stupidity of not even the stupidity, that's not the word, the gall of that man who try and understand. There's if you hurt someone, you cannot tell them when they can forgive you. And that is what he is trying to do. Did he hurt every single person on the Enterprise? No. But did he have a hand in a lot of their hurt? Yes. Just because you are trying to work towards peace does not mean I have to forgive you. Does not mean I have to talk to you. Does that mean I have to entertain you, give you any part of my free time, my mental space, anything? Just because you are trying to be a better person, good for you. Stay out of my way. It is not for me to forgive you for you. It is for me to forgive you for me. And he was like forcing himself into the lives of the more people who were hating him. He talked to Ortegas more. He talked to Dr. Mbenga as much as he could. He even I'm not quite sure if he like really interacted with Nurse Chapel a lot, but it was just like the person who did not want anything to do with you. You kept forcing yourself to be in their presence because you felt like you are redeeming yourself. It's not for you to decide when he has to forgive you.
I felt as though he was using Mbenga because I think he stated that he needed a human ally.
Yes.
Basically going on tour and all of his work with the Federation. He needed to align with someone, and he thought he could use Mbenga because Mbenga was there. What he did not know was what Mbenga has been holding in this whole time, knowing that the ambassador is a farce, that he's been lying this whole time, and to the Federation, to everyone that he meets. And for Mbenga not to share that information with Pike, not to share that during that dinner or anything like that, that shows a whole other level of skill in politics.
It does, because Dr. Mbenga basically begged that man to leave his office. Even when he went to hand-to-hand combat, he sort of called him out. He was like, oh, you took all those Klingons down, like, yourself? Like, basically saying, you can fight with all of this? It was almost the ambassador's hubris that, I think I'm using the right word, that, like, made him think that just because you're on a Starfleet ship, everyone there was like Pike. And yes, he wanted an ally. He even said, like, we don't have to be friends, but we can be allies. Find someone else. Because Dr. Mbenga, when he asked you to leave, you should have left. Because then we come to one of the most shocking scenes. It happened blurry, somewhat off screen. We don't get a full view of it. But one of the most shocking things is we see Dr. Mbenga murder him. I don't care what he says. That man murdered the ambassador. I'm so sorry. Was it justified?
Or self-defense?
Huh?
Self-defense?
Was it though?
We don't know. We couldn't see everything.
Do I think he was in his 100% right mind? No, I do not. I do not think he was 100% in his right mind. I think he was stressed. He was angry. He was dealing with the panic attack and the PTSD. He was do I think that if he had time to think it through, would he have done the same actions? No, but he was in it. The guy wouldn't leave him alone. Dr. Mbenga asked him to leave. He asked him to leave.
But Rob put his hands on him. We saw that scene. Violated his personal space.
He did.
And he just...
And so the reason I'm calling it what it is because it was revenge. It was definitely revenge, and it wasn't self-defense. Because Dr. Mbenga could have taken him down if he wanted to. He really could have.
Well, he did.
Okay, non-lethally. Do I blame Dr. Mbenga for what he did? No. Do I support it? No. It's like, but one of those things where it's just like, I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. Nurse Chapel even understood.
Oh, yes. So Mbenga had orders to take him out a long time ago. He was just finishing it. And this also shows that Nurse Chapel and M'Benga are tight.
They are.
They recover for each other because she said that she saw everything, but I'm not exactly sure.
No, she came at the end. She came around the corner at the end.
Yeah. And I think she saw the same thing we saw, like action behind a screen,
behind the glass, the frosted glass. Mm-hmm. We also see that Dr. M'Benga kept the knife that he killed all the other generals with.
And did not clean it.
He did not clean it because it had all the same bloods on it. All the same blood. And it's sort of like, because the ambassador never actually came out and said that he wasn't the one to kill everyone, his lie of omission, lie of accepting someone else's version of the truth, allowed his death to be accepted by. The thing is, I don't think Pike doesn't accept it, because Pike really truly is a Boy Scout. But sometimes you have to get your hands dirty. War is never clean. War is not easy. That man created the order of killing all non-Klingons. It did not matter what race you were. Did not matter what you were aged. They were killing families, children, women. It didn't matter. They were slaughtering people. Dr. M'Benga even told Captain Pike, if I told you that he killed kids, would it have changed the reaction? Would it have changed your viewpoint? Would it have been acceptable to you then? Because Pike knows M'Benga's lying. You can tell by the way Pike is upset that he knows M'Benga's lying. He just doesn't know why, and he just doesn't know how it happened.
Right. That shows the level of skill for M'Benga. But I was also thinking, Ra, you deserved it. Hey, you could have stayed in your quarters. You asked to engage with him, and you could have also asked Leon. She's also a judo fighter. You could have. There's lots of other things you could have done, but you picked the wrong person at the wrong time.
And when someone tells you to leave, leave. Don't ask questions. Leave. Because at worst, they just don't want to see you. At best, you just saved yourself from being killed. Ra did not do any of those things. I have to say, the ending scene is a little haunting, because the ending scene, you have Dr. M'Benga going back to, like, he's like, the med bay bed is fixed, but it's going to be broken again because things have a way of doing that. And then you see the bed itself glitch again. And I feel like it's like foreshadowing that Dr. M'Benga is going to break down again. He's going to do something again.
I think it's the Gorn, because earlier he mentioned that that piece of equipment hasn't operated the same since their Gorn mission. And then it's glitching, and we know there's 2 episodes left in the season, and one of these going to include the Gorn. So,
yeah, but it's still part of, like, Dr. M'Benga is always, like, quote unquote good to go. And in this episode, in the last couple episodes of the season, we've been seeing more sides to him. And I felt like we're going to see this side of him again. I don't know when we're going to see it. It may be while he's fighting the Gorn, but we're going to see this side of him fully come out again. Is it going to be a bad thing that it comes out? It could be a great thing it comes out. I don't know when it's going to come out, but I feel like it was also a nod at him. Like, he's not fixed. He's opened the door to a side of him that should have stayed closed.
Yes, you could say the same thing regarding whether it's Chapel or Erica as well. I mean, just interacting with Ra brought back memories. So it could trigger other things. And for Nurse Chapel, she realized she's having a hard time communicating. And I hope that, we'll see how this also works, because now Spock's feelings are hurt because he feels as though he can't help her. So,
and he can't.
Yeah. She has to deal with it herself. They
both need an actual therapist, not a doctor masquerading as a therapist. Sorry, Discovery. I know I always say that, but they need a therapist, because the only way to get healed is to do the work, and is to heal and to address the issues. But you need to deal with someone who can actually help you through it.
In my opinion, they all need therapy.
No, they all need therapy, but they need a special post-trauma therapist, someone who can actually help them how to handle your panic attacks, how to handle the PTSD that comes from being around a Klingon, because this is not going to be the only Klingon they're ever going to be around. How else? Like you need to work to get through it, and I don't want if Nurse Chapel and like Spock end, I want it to be because they end, not because she's like, I can't do this, and she pushes him away like we know she's going to because she can't do commitment. I want them to end to be like ended so that way he can get back into praying, because I'm still hoping that we will change their future. Even though I know, but still, let a girl have some hope.
So this is a drama, right? And so there's always going to be issues that develop with all the characters. And we're not really going to see a lot of closure because they need to be able to pull these storylines back out. But Leon, she got triggered the last time we saw Gorn and she froze.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like Pike with thinking about the future and his fate. And we already saw that had ripple effects to his romance for his romantic life. So I feel as though they all need someone to talk to. But
we all need therapy.
Yeah.
And we need Captain Kirk. What's up, James C?
I do have one issue with this episode.
Just one?
Yeah.
I'm many. Okay. We see who's trying to be the favorite of the show.
And we've learned that the Klingons cut off their hair during Time of War.
Yes.
But during the flashbacks and the scenes with M'Benga fighting the Klingons, they definitely had long hair. Because the hair was also entwined into the knife, around the knife. So
that was something I didn't understand either.
Yeah, there's a continuity issue there.
Because I thought the same thing. I was like, is their hair? I said, why is their hair long? I thought they cut their hair in war and they only grew it out in times of peace.
Right. Yeah, so I could see how Rosh, I'm comfortable with him having long hair, but definitely in that fight scene.
In that fight scene, they should have been like completely bald.
Yeah.
And also another continuity error. They showed a version of the Klingons from the Discovery show.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see the Klingons on this show. And they don't match up. The Klingons are, and they're supposed to be in the same universe, same timeline. And those Klingons do not add up. The Klingons we are meeting in this episode and this season are more like Worf. And then the Klingons we met in Discovery were something completely different. So it's very interesting that they're not holding true or the same in makeup and like how they're doing their Klingons, because they're very different.
Yes, but aren't there like 12 factions and they all look different? It's like some of them have more receding hairline than others. I don't know what else is called.
Well, I know we met a lot. We met like almost all of them in some way, shape, or form in Discovery. Like when they had that big old meeting. So it's just like they all looked a little different, but they all looked more like Discovery version.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, because I like the earrings and there's albino, so it was interesting seeing the variation there. But I also understand what you're saying. The makeup,
yeah,
very similar to Next Generation.
Yeah. And I'm gonna be super honest. It makes them look a little bit more human to me, and I can actually recognize them. Like they don't scare me as much. So I ain't mad at the ones that we're doing for Strange New Worlds. I just would like continuity. Keep them the same, please.
Yeah, I'm just glad that we don't have Laurel. That's my final word. Just let that character go.
I'm comfortable. God, she makes me uncomfortable. Okay, more episodes to go. But as always, I'm Andrea.
And I'm Moneca.
And live long and prosper.